So thank you very much for joining us today, everybody. This is going to be something that Mike and I are going to do basically whenever we feel we have something interesting to say. So we'll find out what the cadence of that ends up being. But my name is Maeve Webster with Menu Matters, and joining me today is Mike Kostyo. We recently went to the Fancy Food Show, so what we wanted to do is basically just take some time and talk through some of the really interesting things we saw and why we think it matters to the industry. Mike?
Yes. I know. I mean, right off the bat, Maeve, was there anything that you kind of took away as just a general, this is a trend that's happening, or kind of your overall takeaways from the show?
Yeah, I'd say that the first thing that I noticed, and you and I talked about this, is that there weren't any enormous industry shifting, category shifting products. Nothing that was changing the way we looked at ice cream or produce or something like that. There were a lot of really interesting advancements and innovations in categories, but nothing that I think was groundbreaking. That was the first thing.
Yeah, I think, in years past when we would go to the Fancy Food Show, there was always those 2 or 3 things that were like, this is wild. This is, when consumers see this, it's really going to be groundbreaking. And yeah, I think we're still a little bit in that post-COVID, not necessarily hyper innovative space right now, which is okay. I think a lot of these brands are still, trying to survive and figure it out. I think I was more surprised by even the lack of some categories that I thought I might see more often at the show, like maybe some of the plant-based stuff, maybe some more of the spirit-free or mocktail area.
Another category that I was just talking to somebody about today that really was not represented was hummus, which was everywhere a couple of years ago.
And like hummus related things, like so much tahini years ago. Absolutely, you're right. Yeah. And even Mediterranean as a whole, I didn't think we saw quite as much of.
Not quite as much, right? Yeah. But and this is something we did see a lot of, certainly, was this idea of packaging and design. So we're going to talk about a lot of interesting flavor and product trends, but I would say the one thing that really did stand out to me as a trend was this different sensibility around design and what packaging design should look like, colors, formats, and really focusing on how do you make a product stand out, in this case, on the shelf.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think there's some categories that we're doing it particularly well. I think, the one in the upper left here, the mint category, there were a few packages around mints or small candies or things like that. Chocolate, one that always does a really good job. I think the gorgeous packaging that you see in the tin fish category, particularly when that category has grown so much and now we see so many more of those brands on the shelves and they have to stand out. I mean, that's a great example right there. I also think the number of brands that we're showcasing really kind of in-your-face designs, a lot more color. It's not that, austere branding that we used to see. It's a lot more innovative and in-your-face, and in some cases kind of maximalist almost.
It is, but, I would say that it's maximalist, but without being frenetic. And you weren't seeing as much of the hyper fluorescent colors or some of that design sensibility that had like an ADHD feel about it, where you were desperately trying to get attention. These, especially the mints and the seafood, the tin seafood, they've got bold colors, bold shapes, and they certainly catch your eye, but they're still almost simple in a certain way too. It's maximalism that's almost reined in, so it's more approachable.
And it's fun. Like, I think we saw a lot of fun packaging that you might associate with, like Gen Z. They love kind of like wavy shapes and things like that. I often call their aesthetic like the Pee Wee Herman Playhouse kind of aesthetic. And you saw some of that, but I think particularly at the Fancy Food Show, done in a way that was pretty classy and kind of upscale. And I mean, this is still always a category that packaging is so important. And I think this Brook 37 brand is such a great example of taking a category that, isn't necessarily always incredibly upscale. And I mean, their packaging, which is the tea category, is just so elegant. I think they did an absolutely incredible job here.
Elegant without being stuffy, right? I mean, there's the elegance from you go into an antique store and it's the
Yeah.
silver tea sets that are, you know, classic white tablecloth, white glove, whereas this is elevating a day-to-day experience, making it very upscale and, to your point, very classy without that stuffiness about
Yes.
it.
And I think the funny thing that really attracted us to their booth, even before we got there, was that they were serving tea in a wine decanter.
Oh, loved that.
Right off the, wasn't it? I mean, just such a good idea. One, I actually think it did open up the tea. I mean, I'm no tea expert, but I thought the experience was really great. But it did, you know, take it to that next level where you do associate it with a very premium category like wine.
Yep. And really rethinking the serving vessels, which like Kathy Casey is amazing at doing that kind of innovation, where you really think beyond just the standard, what kind of glass am I going to serve this in, to think about tea as wine and then to serve it as you would wine was both simple and genius at the same time.
Right? Have you seen all of the operators, and now it's kind of an at-home trend, where they're serving cocktails or other things that you might infuse in French presses?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Which is, again, yeah, I love it. It's visually, it's amazing. It's interactive. It leaves a little extra at the table, depending on what it is. I mean, yeah, it's simple and genius.
And I love it too. I mean, you already have these French presses back of house for the morning. Why not make use of them in the evening, you know?
You know, and the other thing is they're not that expensive. If you're looking to do this, you don't have to go out and spend, you know, a lot of money in order to get a French press that looks pretty good and is going to work perfectly fine for the for what you're doing with it.
Exactly. And I put Brook 37 in here as well for another reason, which is that they had this celebratory tea. You can see it on the package there. It calls out, you know, this is a particular tea for celebrations. I thought it was interesting the number of brands at the show that were positioning themselves as social brands or as, you know, an option that you might have for a party or something that you might enjoy with other people. The other one that you and I both were kind of floored by when we were at the show was this cold case ice cream, which is a gourmet ice cream brand, and the ice cream itself really is delicious. But they deliver it to your home, 6, pints of this delicious ice cream with a black envelope that actually has a mystery inside. So you're not only getting this great food experience, but you're also getting that entertainment experience in the home where you're solving a mystery with your family or your friends, whoever it may be. I think it's such a great example of, taking a brand beyond just, here's a product on the shelf, buy it and eat it, and taking it to that next level and giving consumers that kind of connecting experience or entertainment experience.
Yeah, the things that really, in addition to all of that, you're absolutely right, that stood out to me about that brand is, number one, they told us that it was a lot of businesses who were buying it for their work from home employees in order to create better connection and try and create that engagement that you're not going to get with people who are not coming into the office all the time. So that was really genius to position it also for this new situation that we're all many of us are finding ourselves in. I think what you said about the product flooring us is important because no matter how kitschy and unique and interesting all the extras might be, often the product ends up suffering because they're focused so much on the other things. This was not the case. This was a phenomenal product. Delicious. So they did not skimp on the taste, which is what you say all the time. I say all the time. You can't. If you're going to skip on the flavor, you're done. But the final thing that I'll say on this is, I think it also showed how a retail product can create experiential events or experiences maybe not just the way, but similar to how restaurants might approach it, right? And often the retailers will say, well, we can't do that, right? We can't do the experiential thing that the restaurants can. I don't know. This company kind of thought about it differently, and they did create something that will engage a lot of people, probably in the room and outside of it as well.
Right, exactly. And I think I actually had a friend, I had posted some of these products on social media, and I have a friend that loves things like this. She goes to escape rooms all the time. She's always doing puzzles at home. She loves, mysteries in general. And she could not have been more excited about this product. So I think there's that, audience already out there who loves this type of thing. But I also think, one, it's exactly what you said. It was delicious. I remember there was somebody at the booth there next to us, and they were like, I feel the butterfat. I feel how gourmet and luxurious this brand is. So yeah, taste being number one. If this, is delivered to your house and it doesn't taste good, obviously, the mystery that comes with it is not going to make up for it.
And you really know the products that were hitting it with people when you walked up to the booth and somebody who's not even working there starts selling you on the product. And that was the case with this, was the case with a couple of others where you walked up and they're like, you have to try this. This
Right.
is amazing. And they start telling you everything that they just found out about it. Now you know that you've really hit a chord.
And there's a few brands that have done a good job of that. I remember during the pandemic, there was a ghost kitchen brand named Codename Burger. And it was, on the DoorDash and Uber Eats and all those third-party delivery services. And it was burgers and fries and, all the things that you would get from a fast food burger restaurant. But in a similar fashion, they delivered this mystery to your house that you did on your phone. And, as you kind of played this mystery with your family or your friends, you unlocked coupons for the future, you unlocked maybe a free fry the next time you order. So like you said, I think there's ways that you can definitely give people those more interactive experiences, those entertainment experiences at home. It doesn't necessarily have to just be for food service.
Right, exactly.
Oh my gosh.
So these are great. I know.
I think this is such a great example of what we've been talking about. I think a lot of us in the industry are talking about in general, which is that value is so important this year, but that doesn't necessarily mean everything needs to be low cost. In a year when, there's a presidential election coming, when consumers are still very anxious, a lot of times those premium products, those little treats for themselves and indulgences can go a long way to, taking some of that anxiety away. And so the amount of caviar we saw at the show, like I felt lucky to be in the food industry because we got to try so much caviar in Vegas last week.
It's totally true. And this ties really well into an issue that you and I have talked a lot about and that we've put into the Consumer Needs State report, is that idea of living well, right? And part of living well, it doesn't always have to be that I'm spending a few $100s on a steak or that I'm blowing my savings on an enormous vacation. Sometimes it's just being able to afford an upscale version of something as basic as potato chips, right? Everybody loves them, but these are a little zhuzhed up, right? They're a little bit more fancy. They're a little bit more exciting. Same thing with the vodka, right? I mean, people are probably more now than ever before buying vodka for home, right? And now they can have that kind of an experience. And also, not to miss it, those little bubble jars in the back. Again, so genius and simple is they're taking caviar service and making it more modern and more accessible to a younger consumer. So those are holders that a consumer can then put the caviar that they're buying into that holder for service. It makes it more modern, more playful, less stuffy, but still fancy feeling, right?
And in that report, we asked consumers, what are some premium products or ingredients or categories that you've always wanted to try and you haven't necessarily had the chance yet? And caviar was one of the top options that came up over and over. And I think these products do a really good job of making a product that might be inapproachable. Maybe it's something that they've heard isn't necessarily the most delicious thing, or it is super expensive, but it puts it, in a little bit more of an approachable package. In the case of the crisps here, you've probably seen a number of the operators out there that are doing the caviar bumps where they, will put a little bit on your hand and you do a little caviar bump for $20 or whatever it may be. So I think taking these, indulgences and making them more approachable is also going to be really key for the year ahead.
Yeah, agreed. So this was a booth that was featuring a lot of different foods from Spain, but highlighted this, and I don't think that this is going to come as a surprise to most people on this call, is that the retail was particularly the frozen food, and that's the picture in the lower left. The frozen food aisle at retailers is not what it used to be. It is not your grandparents' frozen food aisle. I mean, you're talking about foods that have real restaurant sensibility. Obviously, Jose Andres is not going to be throwing his name on something that's junk and that's not going to taste good. So it's authentic because obviously that's his background. That's, what his passion is. But it's also high quality, very simple design, and the product is delicious, absolutely delicious. And then ironically, a friend in the industry sent me this picture of his chips saying how amazing they are and that I had to try them. He had no idea that we were covering this today, that we were doing this recording. And again, elevating something as basic as potato chips. And unlike the others that we just looked at that had the caviar and, we're all fancy, this is elevating them by simply focusing on excellent ingredients, simple. I think it's just literally potatoes, salt, and olive oil, better process. And now suddenly a potato chip is something completely different than what it could be. So, and obviously that's also what Chef Jose is all about as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's so key too, is, if you're entering that category, it does have to be a high quality, product. I think, when we see all of these, Jose Andres of the world, or, Gordon Ramsay has a brand in the frozen food aisle now. You see Rayos with frozen, Italian meals. I think, one, there's a lot of competition there, and the bar has been set a lot higher. So, you definitely have to make sure that you're living up to those brands that are going to be around you, which are a lot more premium than they used to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, we both talked about this brand.
Lots of comments about this.
Yeah.
So Mike mentioned the design around chocolate, and there's no doubt that the chocolate category across the board, and not just here in the US, but worldwide, has done an unbelievable job with regard to design on their packages. It's really actually amazing how that category has embraced design sensibilities in such a unique and evocative way to pair it with the chocolate that they're presenting. But in this case, we're not talking about the design, we're talking about the flavors. And this lamb skewer chocolate, of all the products we tasted, that is one that still sticks with me. I think I'm going to have to go online and buy it, to be honest.
Right? And we posted some of these products on LinkedIn. And I think this and another product that we'll talk about a little bit later were the two that we got the most comments on because they were so surprising to people. And I think the key here was that they were surprising to us when we saw, when we saw lamb skewer chocolate, we were like, we had to have it. We had to try it. But I think we were a little skeptical that it was going to taste good until we talked to the representative at the booth there. And he told the story behind why he did it, which is he was from Beijing. He loved lamb skewers at the street markets there. And he wanted to recall those flavors that he grew up with in the product that he's making, which in this case was these craft chocolates. And so really, it's just a very high quality chocolate that has some of those flavors that you might associate with the lamb skewer. So there's cumin in there. There was some spicy flavors in there. So it didn't necessarily taste like a savory lamb skewer. It was just some of those, cumins and flavors like that were complementing the chocolate. Yeah, like you said, I would buy it in a heartbeat. It was actually very delicious, but then it had that story behind it as well, which really took it over the top.
Yeah, and I would say this brand in particular, and then chocolate again in general, is doing an amazing job of taking complex experiences like lamb skewers. You see the boba tea here, and there are countless other examples, right? Where they're taking the idea of that experience and really effectively boiling it down into a chocolate bar, which you think would be impossible. And then you have it and you're like, yeah, I get it. Like, that's the smell that I would expect. That's the tasting experience I would expect. It's really impressive.
Right? Yes. No, they did a great job. And I think the amount of savory flavors, though, that you do see in chocolate anymore, I think as American consumers have eaten so much more dark chocolate and they, don't necessarily associate it with these hyper sweet chocolates that they might have, previously. Now we see, like the black sesame there, which was actually quite delicious. I think at the show, we saw a lot more savory flavors kind of infiltrating the chocolate space.
Absolutely.
And speaking of boba tea, I mean, I think this was the single most, seen ingredient at the show, at least to me. There had to have been 100, 200 products that included boba, popping pearls, that kind of whole category in some fashion. And I think, it's interesting. I definitely think younger consumers do love this category. Obviously, we've been seeing it at a number of the food service operators out there. But I think to the extent that we saw it at the show, I got the impression that a lot of these brands are kind of chasing this trend a bit, and that I don't necessarily know there's as much of a market for it as there were the number of products that we saw at the show.
Yeah, I would agree. I will admit, Personally, it's not my cup of boba tea. I appreciate what it is, but it's not something that I personally engage in. But what I do think is interesting is how I agree with you, Mike, entirely that they're chasing the trend at this point. But what I appreciate from these examples that we've got here are how they were trying to make it more convenient. Make it something that you didn't have to go to the restaurant or the store for, something that you could experience in different places, in a very easy way. I'm not entirely sure. I don't think we tasted the boba tea in a bag, did we?
Yeah, no.
So I'm not sure how they're truly authentically recreating the boba experience when it's in a tea bag. I'm certainly not going to say that the product's not good. It might be excellent. But it's not really the boba experience that I think most consumers are expecting who are into that category. But the boba in a can, I think, is just showing how they're trying to make it more convenient, easier, something you can have anytime. It's not a special occasion item.
Absolutely. Yeah. The boba in the bag itself, I tried to look it up because how does that work? You would think that the tapioca pearls would kind of be trapped in that bag, which would kind of negate the whole purpose of it. So I'm not sure how it works. I mean, the packaging is gorgeous. Yeah, it could be a very good product. I think, the boba and oat milk, the number of products that were including oat milk, not as, even kind of the center of the product itself or highlighting it. It was just they went for oat milk because younger consumers love it so much. I think we saw a number of those products at the show. But I do think, when you look at younger consumers and what they're drinking, I live, right near a college campus here. And I think there are 3 kind of Asian-inspired drink shops right around me because so many of the college students are drinking things like, boba drinks and popping pearls. So I think there will be some of these products that, do pretty well into the future. I think some are, maybe of the lesser quality products maybe won't stick around, but some of the ones that really resonate with younger consumers, we may see for quite a few years here.
Yep, I agree. I love this one, right? This touches on so many different trends, Mike, that you've talked about, that we've talked about collectively, this idea of authentic communication, right? Embracing the weird, embracing the unusual. But what I love the most about this, first of all, their products were very good, right? It wasn't something that was design-led without quality behind it. But this is actually a Norwegian brand, a Norwegian brand called Broken Taco, obviously focused on Mexican cuisine, Mexican flavors. And it really made both of us pause and say, you think about, because we're based in the US, you become very US centric in your perspective. I think that's just natural. But why not Norway embracing Mexican cuisine? We didn't hear the backstory. There could be an incredible backstory as to why Mexican cuisine, why them, why in Norway. But this kind of international exploration of flavors, embracing other cuisines, we often talk about it as Americans doing it, and whether or not it's authentic, whether we have the right to do it and all. I think this is happening everywhere. We have to start really broadening our perspectives on what's happening well beyond our own borders to start understanding on a much broader basis what food is, how food is impacting culture worldwide, and then ultimately how it will probably end up moving its way into the US ultimately.
Yeah, I remember seeing years ago, I want to say it's Sweden, one of the Scandinavian countries, they've been doing their version of Taco Tuesday, I think it may be on Fridays, well before we even had. A lot of those younger consumers grew up once a week eating tacos in the same way that we do, And so, I think we have these generations that are growing up where these are just the foods that they remember from their childhood. So it's definitely, absolutely not just a US-centric thing.
Right, exactly.
Oh, this was a fun one and a good one.
Again, another really great product. And I would even tie it back to what we saw with the caviar vodka and everything, where you're taking a very high-end ingredient, in this case saffron, and making it something you can have all the time. You remember the backstory probably better than I do on this, but the saffron was from Washington State, is that right?
Washington. That's what was so interesting. I had no idea we had a domestic saffron, farming agriculture space in the United States at all. So to hear that, this was even a product that could be made in America was really interesting. I forget the name. It's one distillery, yes, out of Seattle that is doing this. The next time we're there, we have to go check it out. But it's clearly a premium product. It's saffron, obviously, so it's clearly a premium product. But yes, a new category, great packaging here. I think both of us really responded to this product.
Yeah, beautiful color. But the saffron market is really interesting. I even mentioned while we were talking to these individuals that Vermont, and many of you know that I'm based in Vermont, Vermont is beginning to develop a domestic saffron business, obviously probably on a smaller scale than Washington State, simply based on who Vermont is. But yeah, but I think that we're going to see this more and more, is interesting produce that is increasingly grown closer to home, which may give us even more options on how to use it and what to do with it.
Sure, absolutely. And again, a very high-end product, a great example, saffron obviously being very expensive, great example of an area where a consumer could indulge.
Sadly, not one that we got samples for.
I know, right? Exactly. We're at the show, they had this massive jar just filled to the brim with saffron. And it had to have been, a few $1,000s worth of saffron right there at the show.
Yeah.
Oh my God. This was one of the first products that we saw at the show. And I posted this on LinkedIn, and I think I got more comments about this single product than anything else that I posted about. And it's such a great idea. So charcuterie has obviously been a trend for a few years here now, and we had seen a number of blogs and media companies putting out there this concept of charcuterie chalets. So a savory version of a gingerbread house where you're putting together crackers and cheese and salami and things like that. So this is a brand that took that concept and put it together in one package. So what a great example of doing the work for the consumer. They don't have to buy, 5 different things from the supermarket to put this together. It's all ready for them. It's another great example of, a product that might bring people together. You're probably going to do this with your kids, or you're probably going to do this with your family. And it's also, just such an attention getter. I can't tell you the number of people that asked me about this product. I remember talking to her and she said, I don't believe they have distribution yet, but with the way, the entire category of gingerbread houses and advent calendars and kind of experiential holiday products has grown in the past few years, I don't think it'll be long before they're on shelves.
Well, and look at it this way too. This does not need to be holiday only. There's no tradition that ties it solely to a holiday. This ends up being a product that is year round, and that they could even do seasonal versions of it without that pushback that like a spring gingerbread house might end up having.
True, that's a great idea. You could do a charcuterie treehouse for summer, or a log cabin or something like that.
Exactly.
And there was another.
Sometimes the innovation. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
I was going to say, sometimes the innovation, all you need to do is take a charcuterie board and make it vertical. Like that's as easy as it is.
When there was another product at the show that I saw that was, the witch's fingers cookies that people make around Halloween. It was a kit like this, but you could make witch's fingers. It came with everything you needed. It came with the little almonds to do the fingernails. So another great example of, just making it a little bit easier on the consumer.
Yep.
This was one you saw, I know.
Yeah, and speaking of making things easier for the consumer, I think it ties into what we saw with the boba, where you're thinking about a product, in this case broth, that has done very well. It's still very popular. It has a lot of broad applications, both alone and also, in a lot of other items. So how do you make that something that is beyond maybe opening up a can or something powdered that you pour in, and making it into sachets, right? That becomes far more portable. You can bring that with you when you're traveling. You can store that at work. It takes up a lot less space. You don't have any kind of storage issues. And the product was really good. Now, Mike, was this the one that was plant-based that we tried?
I don't think it was. I was trying to remember too, because we tried a brand. Yeah. It was like chicken flavor and beef flavor, but then when we talked to them, it was all plant-based. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to promise. So I didn't.
Right. Yeah, I can't remember.
But yeah, I honestly don't remember.
But it's interesting. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I can't see you.
No, you're right.
I can't react.
Right. I can see you, but you can't see me. Okay, yeah. No, all I was going to say is it is making something very easy for the consumer. And like Mike and I have said a million times, you always have to ask yourself, how are you taking care of your customers? How are you helping them live better in some way or another, whether that's through value, ease, health, whatever it ends up being. And this company really thought, how can we take care of our customers and allow them to enjoy this product more often and more easily, and came up with a really interesting solution. Sorry, Mike.
No. I think that's absolutely true. And I think part of it also connects to this idea of coziness and kind of that demand that consumers have to be taken care of in that cozy way. You had sent me, Maeve, yesterday the article about cozy cardio, where people are at home and lighting candles and putting their comfy sweats on. And, they're maybe walking on a little treadmill while they watch their favorite TV show. And I think there is something to this idea that, consumers are a little stressed out. And so they just want to be at home. They want to take care of themselves. They want to be cozy. And a sipping broth, in a cozy little mug like that on the front of the package, I think does a really good job of kind of hitting that need state.
Yep, I agree.
Saw
this one.
I think this was, the point of this is not to talk about our favorite products or what we thought were so delicious. But, I think everything that we talked about here, we wouldn't talk about if we also didn't think it was delicious, but it had these other, trends or things that they were going for. But this was a delicious product. I think I talked to the representative for a good 20 minutes at his booth. And so all it really is, it is an Irish product that comes from Ireland, is an apple butter that has been cooked down so much that, one, it has a very, very thick consistency. You can kind of see it on the crackers there. I would almost liken it to like a miso. So it's much, much thicker than like an apple butter that you might find here in the States. And two, obviously, if you cook it down that much, it has a really, really rich texture and rich flavor to it. And so I think it's a great example of innovating in an area where we might think that, what else can you do with apples and apple butter? In the United States, obviously we have tons of apples. We, eat apples in every format imaginable. What else could we possibly do? This was a brand that figured out, a new variation on apples. And two, his passion for the product, the amount of opportunities he talked about when it came to both savory and sweet applications. It is, because it's cooked down so much, it's so rich, it's not even necessarily very sweet and sugary. It does almost have kind of a savory flavor to it. So he was talking about, putting it on duck or goose or venison or, proteins like that. He was talking about doing compound butters and using those with protein. So I think this was one of the products that I really want to buy. And I actually looked at their website to see if they ship to the States. I don't think they do yet. But it's just such a great example of a really good product that is also a really cool innovation within this category.
When you told me, and sadly that was not something that I had a chance to try, but when you told me about this, the first thing that popped into my mind last year when I was at the Canary Islands, we went to a banana plantation. And one thing that this one very small woman-owned plantation was doing was trying to create additional further prepared or other products with the bananas in order to sell. And they were drying the bananas down well beyond what we typically stop at, right? To the point where they were almost black. They were so dried. And the flavor of those bananas, granted, from an American consumer point of view, it looked completely not like what you would expect. So you'd have that to deal with. But the flavor was amazing. The texture was actually quite good, but the flavor was really spectacular. You couldn't believe that was a banana. And that's the first thing that I thought of. So it's really interesting to think how much further can you take it and what will it end up tasting like at that point.
Right? And it almost reminds me of fermentation and how fermentation has gotten, one, so much bigger in this country, but also two, the directions that we've taken flavor in because of fermentation in some of these, products and produce options, I think has opened up a lot of new flavor profiles in the industry and for consumers.
Agreed. So one of my favorite, not just because they were out of Scotland, though that helped, of course, but it was an amazing product. The texture was crisp and yet delicate. The flavors were fantastic. The one that you can see the arrow pointing from, the purple box, that's actually Scottish seaweed. So they also did, that box in particular did not have it, but he said the new boxes were going to be calling that out. So then, of course, you've got the evocative, source of origin call out as well, but they were great. What I loved about this, and again, it's going back to how do we make things easy for consumers? And sure, a consumer could eat these on their own. It's not like crackers are necessarily hard to figure out what to do with, but they have put on the front of every single one of their packages drink pairings, and not just for wine or not just for beer, for several different options. So for every one of these packages, they have several types of beer you could pair it with, several types of wine you could pair it with, and what you often don't see is several types of cocktails you could end up, and spirits that you could pair it with. Talk about not only giving consumers a great product that was spectacular on every level, but then helping them to see how they could use it in both traditional and non-traditional ways. I thought it was fantastic. And like Mike said, you talked to them, they had incredible passion. They told you how they developed the recipes, where all the ingredients were coming from. All of that just serves to, again, create such an evocative product. And I think it's that evocativeness that we all need to be embracing, whatever that means for your product or brand.
I agree. I love this too. I wish I'd had a chance to taste it. I love that they call out a Negroni in particular. Which I think, I mean, we both love Negronis, but it's a very bitter drink that can be kind of hard to pair a lot of foods with. So it's interesting to call that out. I think, like you said, it is so evocative too. Even if you're just going to have this at home at the end of the day with your favorite drink, when you're going to purchase it, you probably do imagine that pairing because you're going to do a dinner party or something like that. So I think it also kind of brings to mind that this could be a real social option, which, as we've talked about so many times and is in our need states report, that people really do want to connect in the year ahead. So I think this is a product that would do a great job with them.
Yeah, and while none of these flavors are overly unusual for kind of the average American consumer, I think if you were to add more unusual flavors, or flavors that are simply were pushing the boundaries a little bit more, in order to have pairings with drinks that are very familiar and very close in for consumers, all you're doing is facilitating their desire and ability to try something, because they think, well, if this will work with the IPA that I love drinking all the time, why not? How bad could it end up being? And then they'll give it a shot and hopefully then become repeat buyers. So it's genius on a number of different levels.
And I think this is a great example, too, of where the food service side of the industry could learn so much. To this day, I still say the wine menu is so confusing to consumers. They go into a restaurant, they get this list of 50, 75, 100 bottles. The idea that they know what all of those bottles are and taste like just based on, a year and a location and the grape variety is outlandish. They're never going to know all that. So offering information like this, drink pairings, what the flavor of that wine is like, I think is so important. I think this is a great example of where a CPG product is doing a lot better than even some food service operators.
Yep, agreed.
And I think that's the last one we have, actually. Now I can see your face again when I...
Yay! So we're, like I said, we're going to be doing these more often, talk about shows that we go to, restaurants, that we have visited if we're traveling. So look for them. We'll post them on LinkedIn. We will start posting them on the website, which is going to be under construction probably in the next month or so, but start looking for them there. And as always, reach out to myself or Mike. We would love to talk with you about these, answer any of your questions, and, chat through what's going on in the industry.
Absolutely. Yeah, that need states report that we talked about over and over again. It's free, available to the industry. If you send an email they can send it to you, maeve@menumatters.com. Just send us a message and we're happy to send it your way. But we love doing these. I think this has been really fun. So we can't wait to do more of them.
Exactly. So we'll see you guys around.
Thanks.
Bye.